New Unreal Engine 5.8 brings crazy update to MetaHuman, which now allow to import complete custom mesh. But do you really understand how big is that? It basically means we can generate any custom humanoid character with AI, bring it into Unreal Engine and get a MetaHuman with facial rigs, with body rigs that will support live link, can be used in games, or for example new Markerless mocap animations. That is absolutely mind-blowing. And in this video I'm gonna show you full tutorial. I'm gonna make not only one but 4 characters to show you different cases, different options. No one did it on YouTube yet, guys. So like that button, I need your support. Let's get started. So to get started, we're gonna need some prerequisites. Of course, we're gonna need Unreal Engine 5.8 installed with all MetaHuman's plugins. If you don't know how to do that, you're gonna go to options and make sure MetaHuman creator code data is installed. If it's not, just check this checkbox and click apply. That will download everything needed. Another thing, in MetaHuman, go to plugins and make sure all MetaHuman plugins are enabled, then restore the Unreal Engine. For 3D software, we're gonna use Blender since it's absolutely free. We're also gonna need MetaHuman Conform body for size reference. You can get it for free on Fab. The link will be somewhere in the description. And of course, we're gonna need to generate that 3D. I'm gonna use Triple because that works best for me, but you can generate it any other based on your preferences. So I prepared 4 characters that we're gonna create. So you can see they all have different proportion. The acrobat, V-shape, ballerina, very tall, thin hands, thin legs, very small head. We have Drow and Dryad. The most complex here probably is Dryad because we have custom head with those branches and stuff. So we're gonna start with her. Other characters, there are a few tricks that might be usable depending on the complexity of the character. So I'm gonna show them one by one. Now let's start with the base workflow. So first of all, we need to prepare base 3D model that we're gonna use as input for mesh to MetaHuman. So here there are a few important things to take care of. First of all, we're gonna need right pose. I recommend a pose. Make sure that there is some space between legs or they are not too close. And the second important place is armpits. We don't want arm to go too close to the body. That might cause some issues when we're gonna do mesh conform. We really want all fingers to be separated. The pose doesn't really matter. What's matter is that fingers are not merged. So you can see I generated the body, and what I like in Triple is that 8K texture really helps with big details. But of course you're still gonna need to decrease it to 4K to not get too crazy on memory. Another thing that I'm not using smart mesh or low poly mesh for this case. This body will be a reference later for baking or transferring information such as normal maps, so you want it to be highly detailed. And I'm using HD model for this. Next up, we're gonna need head. I do head separate because again, I want to keep details. I want everything to be accurate. Make sure there are no lashes or whatsoever because we're gonna not need them, and we need to remove hair. With Dryad, however, you can see that there are some branches. That's because we're gonna do hair later and I want a seamless transition. You can see that all the branches and ears was generated as a separate mesh. That's how it should be. Any accessories like hair, etc., everything but skull should be removed. My case is more of an exception because of the transition which you're gonna see later. And if you guys also want to try Triple, there will be a link in the description with the best promo code I could possibly get. And I honestly recommend it over any other AI tools. It has everything you might need. Well, that's pretty much it. Now we're gonna bring it all to Blender and combine that in one mesh that we're gonna use as a reference for the MetaHuman. There are not much magic happening here. The only thing that you don't care about the mesh resolution, so keep it high poly, no need to optimize. Just make sure that fingers are separated, that mesh fits overall. So like I just used some pose mode to combine things together. That's pretty much it. And we're also gonna later use it for baking, so just make sure you like it overall. But keep it high poly and join the geometry so you can pretty much make it on one object. Last thing we do here before inputting to MetaHuman, let's drop here that MetaHuman Conform body that you got from Fab. This one is needed for a size reference, so when we export it there, it matches. The only thing we need to do here is just to set the size and then Ctrl A and apply scale and rotation. We need to make sure this is the original rotation. Before exporting, make sure transforms here are set to 1s and 0s. Location doesn't really matter. Now we can export it as GLB. Again, that's just a static mesh, so no extra settings to tackle. Time to open Unreal Engine now. I'm gonna create third-person template, so later we can also run around and see how it works. Let's go to characters folder and create new folder for our Dryad. Here I'm gonna drag and drop our GLB that we just created, which is the static mesh. Import it with default settings. Okay, you can check that everything is imported. Now we're gonna need to create MetaHuman character. Here, you can create it in the same folder. Let's call it MH Dryad and let's open it. So here we're gonna need to go to Import tab and choose from Custom Mesh, which is by accident is the first tab. And now let's find our static mesh of imported assets and drag and drop it here to Combined Mesh. There's also option to do that like with separated heads and body, but I don't find that convenient, so we're just gonna use Combined Mesh, and you can see it's already uploaded here. So let's maximize that window and see what's happening here. And pretty much that's it. Now we're gonna need to press Auto Solve and see the magic happening. Here we can enable the mocap option, so it will be easy for you to preview how the auto solving is working. Depending on your computer, it might take to up to a few minutes. On my NVIDIA 4070 Super, it was taking like around 2 minutes, and you can see that's happening in real time. And here is the results. We have MetaHuman body perfectly matching our character. Now here on this stage, we're gonna need to do something very important. We're gonna need to go to manual solve action here, and we're gonna need to click save pose. That's gonna save this DNA file of this state. You're gonna save it anywhere. We're gonna save it like to Dryad folder, and this will save mesh in conformed condition, because if we go to the next tab, you can see the pose now is changed. Why is that important that we have original pose? Because later we're gonna do the baking, so we're gonna transfer color, normal maps, and if the pose is not matching, that will be impossible to do. So that one for baking. Now we go to the next tab, and there is head and body options. So first of all, here you can adjust some parts. Say I want to make my eyes a little bit bigger, etc. But overall, I'm pretty happy. Then we go to material tab. So here we have standard MetaHuman settings. They added more skin tones for heads, for body. You can actually play with it, but we don't really need anything related to body or heads. What's matter here is you can set the eyes, teeth, a little bit about that, because we're gonna keep them original. You can of course also edit them later, just replacing texture, etc. But in most of the cases, you will be happy with it. So you can set the eyes and mouse here. Next tab, we also can set hair and clothing, but we don't need that. We're creating custom character. We don't really need that. Now here, the final step will be to create a full rig. To create a full rig, that will take some time. And after that, we're gonna also need to click download texture sources. These two actions basically compile, assemble our MetaHuman all together, and we'll save it locally so we can process it further. The good thing is that don't worry to get something wrong here. You can always go back to this MetaHuman and, for example, export that DNA that we conform. So that's reversible process, all good here. Now, if you did everything right, you're gonna got folder called MetaHuman, and our Dryad will be actually here. Very nice. We can drop that blueprint to Unreal Engine, and yeah, well, that's not our custom character for sure. Well, that's totally fine. Well, now let's go make textures for us. So what we did before, we saved that DNA file. Now we're gonna click generate skeletal mesh from it. Okay, when that skeletal mesh generated, that's exactly what we need. So this one, we're gonna go and export. How to do that? Go to Asset Actions, Export. That will export FBX, and that FBX basically will be the mesh in that exact pose. What's matter, that's still the same mesh with the right UV and so on. So let's go back to Blender and drop that mesh here. And as you can see, it perfectly fits our original body, because now we can easily bake texture to this body. Now let me show you how it's done. There are a few things that you need to know to not fail short. Is first that MetaHuman by default they use UDIMs. If we go to UV editor and show everything, you're gonna see that basically body is unwrapped on the second island. That will not be possible to bake that way in Blender, so we're gonna need to default it really. The defaulted version is like one object and one UV, like no UDIMs. Here's the easiest way to do that. We're gonna open it in edit mode and open UV editor on one side. We're gonna activate this option so it's synchronized. stylized, and I'm gonna select the head carefully. So it will select pretty much the head object. Again, like in Unreal Engine, they are separated, head and body, but we just export it like it as a whole. Now in 3D view, we're gonna press P and separate selection. That will create a separate object for head with this texture. For body, however, we're gonna need to go to edit modes. In this UV editor, we're gonna need to shift the whole UV by -1 exactly. So like it basically like we just shifted it as a UDIM. That's very important to get successful baking. And now actually let's do that. And guys, if you're worried about Blender involved, don't be. I do have free videos on my YouTube channel when I cover the most basics just for you, so you can do that simple steps. I have video about sculpting that help you to get used with that step that I showed in the beginning of the video. And for baking, I also have separate video explaining all the details behind it. Basically, what we're gonna do here is we're gonna create a color map and we're gonna create a normal map. And we're gonna bake information such as, again, color and normal from original body to body that we got from MetaHuman. It is done in Cycles engine in Blender. We're gonna go to bake option. Here for color, for example, we choose bake type as a diffuse. Contribution, we keep only color, and we of course do selected to active. And selected to active, it means that we select our original body first and then select the next one to which we're gonna bake that information. In material editor, we need to make sure that the right texture is selected, and we can press bake. And here you can see the result. The color baked nicely. There is a problem with the transition on the neck. So what I did later is I actually went back to my original one, and here I added like a simple node, color, hue, saturation, and adjusted a little bit to match the body. And since we're still gonna bake that information, I just wanted to make my life easier. Later, again, like all that transition can be adjusted, and I'm gonna show you how to adjust that in Blender. The same way exactly we're gonna need to bake normal map, but in bake time we're choosing normal. So here you can see now we have this volume, normal map at depths, but yeah, there's a problem with the transition. I'm gonna go to texture paints mode right in Blender, and with clone brush and smear brush, just adjust this transition a little bit, both on color and normal map. But baking is not the only way how to do that. I'm gonna show you one more option how you can use AI texturing later in this video on another character. This option, however, give you more control over baked normal, and again, like since you have that high poly source, you can add details there and transfer them later. So similar way, of course, I did the body texture, and now I can just save these textures and bring them to Unreal Engine. So we go to MetaHuman folder, go to body, and we're gonna need to find textures. They're in baked folder, and we're gonna just drop our new textures here. So we're gonna drop body textures first, then we're gonna do the same thing for head. So there are two different ways how to do that. You can either create your new material, which will be simpler than the MetaHuman original material, or you can replace maps directly in the MetaHuman material. The thing is, I'm gonna go to MetaHuman material, which is body baked, and just gonna replace textures here. And here you go, it's already started to look nice. Let's do the same thing for head. Don't be confused, there are LODs, so technically, again, depending on your use case, you might need to replace that texture in all of LODs, but for this example, LOD 0 is definitely enough for me. Very well, here's our result. We actually already did that, but there are custom heads, there are ears, and there's a lot of things that I need to add. So you can add unlimited bunch of things to your character and rig them on top. That's very easy. Let me show you how. For this now, we're gonna need to go to MetaHuman and find the skeletal mesh of final MetaHuman. That's not the same one we used for baking. And there is a body and face separately. Again, like depending on what part it goes to, you're gonna need body and head. You can actually take them both and bring them to Blender. Just click on it, asset action, export, right? It will export that skeletal mesh together with the skeleton / armature that we're gonna use to rig our asset. So let's start with the head. I'm gonna bring it to Blender, and here's how it looks like. So don't be scared, there's a lot of bones because there's a face rig based on bones. You can actually hide the root here to not be distracted. And we're gonna now adjust our custom heads that we generated in Triple to this head. The process is pretty much the same. I'm gonna use a sculpting mode, and here's also the reason why I decided to keep some branches on the head to break them into the texture so we can have like a nicer transition. All right, my object is ready. And now before we bring it to Unreal Engine, we're gonna need to make sure it's optimized. We're gonna do the decimation, or again, like you can generate it low poly right away, because this asset is not a reference. This is actually the asset that you can bring and put on your MetaHuman. But what important thing we're gonna need to do is to give a right name, and we're gonna need to parent it to our armature. How do you do it? Select the object and select the armature with Shift. Now press right mouse button, find the parents, and we're gonna need armature deform. Also, you can do Ctrl P. Okay, now we can see it's parented and this object is already on the armature. And we need to transfer weights. In my case, this whole object will be 100% on the head bone. Again, all that facial bones we don't need. So I'm gonna click on boss object, go to weight mode, find that head bone here, go to weights and set weight. Okay, the red mean basically it's 100% on it. Depending on the nature of the object, if you want custom brows, for example, you might need to interact with the mesh, and maybe there's like a weight transfer or any other operation. Again, there is a dedicated video on my channel about weights, etc. If you're a beginner, if you're a professional, I guess you can do that in any other way. If your object covering face area that will be animated with MetaHuman, you're gonna need to care about weights in general. That also goes for body. But I figure out that simple weight transfer from MetaHuman body works pretty well. Now, when that's done, make sure that your armature is named roots here, and we're gonna need to export it right. First, select only armature and the object. We don't need the head. Press export. We're gonna use FBX. We do not want to export texture, so you can set it to auto. In armature, make sure add leaf bones are deselected. Very important, or the armature will not match the skeleton there. In geometry, you can choose a smoothing groups, and of course selected object only if you have any other files in scene. Export that and import into the Unreal Engine. And one thing to mention, if you did normal baking in Blender or Marmoset toolbag, then in texture tab in import context menu, you're gonna need to set flip normal map green channel. That will make sure it shows as expected. All right, here we go. So now we have our asset imported and it creates material instance, and of course it imported the skeletal mesh. Now, how to put it on our character? Very simple. Go to blueprint, MetaHuman blueprint that we added to the scene. Here you can see the components, and let's drag our skeletal mesh on the body. And that's pretty much it. We can save it and it's already there because the skeleton is matching. When we drop it on the body, it goes on top of the skeleton. And if you did the weights right, it will of course work with animations. The similar thing I did for the body. So I wanted that moss on her body to add volume to that moss on the body. So how did I do that? I basically imported that body, duplicated the body to not mess with the weights, and extruded in sculpting mode that moss parts, and then selected and cut them to another object and export it back to Unreal Engine. It will also use the same texture, but that just will add some volume on some parts and I can have control over it. Okay, here you can see I'm setting up the material. Basically, it uses the same material, right? Boom. And here's our final MetaHuman completely custom character. That's so cool. But does it actually work with animation and all that stuff that I promised? Let's check right now. I generated some video, like a mocap video that we're gonna test right now. And I also found some stock videos. So for this, we're gonna need live link hub. And I'm not gonna go in depth into this markerless animation. Let me know in the comments if you want to cover it in more depth. Important thing is that to make it work, you're gonna need to go to Fab and find MetaHuman Animator Markerless Motion Capture and install that plugin, restart the Unreal Engine, and make sure that plugin is activated in Unreal Engine. You'll not be able to find it by default. With that said, in Live Link Hub, let's go to Mono Video Ingest, and here we're gonna set the folder with the videos that we got. Let's select them and add to queue, so that will basically process them. Then in in our Explorer, we're gonna have folder capture manager, imports, and yeah, you will see all your videos. And videos here is presented like in 3 files, right? We're cool with that. Let's create MetaHuman performance file where we're actually gonna do the mocap. Let's open it here in footage capture data. Let's select the video that we processed, and I want to preview the animation. So we're gonna go to Window, Image Review, and enable that. So that's how we see the reference together with our animation. Now here in settings, we're gonna need to enable body tracking. That's very important, and that will be only available if plugin installed. And it will make possible to select our MetaHuman. So find that blueprint dryad. All set, and we can now finally process the video. It will put some effort on your GPU depending on the resolution of the video. So I don't recommend to upload here like 4K references. It seems like to be dependent on the resolution. Here's a 1K reference and it works pretty smooth. Okay, so all the processing done, and let's preview that. And our character is perfectly moving. Here's another animation that I tested it with, and it's absolutely amazing. You can of course export this animation later and use it in the game, etc. I'm still basically stunned how great this markerless motion capture works. Again, it catches like the face, all the emotions, and for me, again, I saw the comparison with Quick Magic. It seems like this is way better. And again, guys, just think about it, like you have this all for free inside the Unreal Engine. That Conform custom mesh to MetaHuman, that's already huge, and we have like Quick Magic basically, and now we have this AI animation inside our Unreal Engine, all working together. That's so cool. And as we have facial rig, we can also connect it to the live link and get the facial capture from your phone. And here you can see I tested our dryad, and this looks just amazing. Like, I don't know. And of course, you can use it as a character. Here is some of my final testing. I basically replaced third-person controller with my MetaHuman custom character, and you can see the result is just amazing. Now, let's create more characters since there are a few important things to share still. Let's do the acrobat. So as you can see, again, the reference is very important. I want some space in armpits, legs not too tight, and he is bald because if you are not going to remove hair, the mesh will conform around hair and it will result in a very strange skull. Basically the same process. I generated head, hair, body in triple, brought them to Blender, assemble, similar process. However, when I started to do auto solve, basically conforming body to my mesh, there was an issue. The fingers were not recognized right. You can see it here, like in 2 fingers, they put 4 fingers in 2 fingers. Now we're gonna press reset body in this case. Don't worry, that's very easy to fix. You can see all the hotkeys are suggested here in MetaHuman. Basically control, left mouse button, right mouse button. That will help you, and with shift that will add some points. And with this tool, we can manually align points. Again, depending on the complexity of their character, the more custom it is, the more likely it can happen in some area. And in this problematic area, we can just help it a little bit. So here you can see I just set the markers myself for the arms. And there is not enough points, you can actually add some new points and also map it to our body. That's absolutely not difficult. And after that, you can press solve body, and here's the updated result exactly as we wanted. You can do that for face as well, etc. The process later was identical. We exported that pose into DNA, then from DNA we exported that mesh, and I did the baking. This time for the man, I did baking in Marmoset toolbag just to show you like different approaches. Then a little bit of adjustments. Hair and brows I did the same way in Blender because again, like I had to export that face mesh and make sure I rigged it. Don't forget to export it with the right export settings. Always remove that leaf bones and it will work extremely smooth. Then just drag and drop that skeletal mesh onto your MetaHuman blueprint, and here we go. Awesome, right? Now let me show you one different approach how you can deal with the texture. Let's say you don't want to bother with baking and you're creating a styled game. Why do I need that normal map? So we're gonna create draw. We're still gonna create head separate for details. Of course, we're gonna remove hair and generate hair separate. I'm gonna assemble all of that in Blender, but in this case, I will not really care about texture. I only care about shape, and you know why. Don't forget to scale it right according to the Unreal Engine body, join it into one object and bring it to the Unreal Engine. Now, what will be the difference here is that after we did the conform, we'll not need this pose because we're not going to do the baking. And we can skip that part and go continue to set eyes, mouse, pretty much eyes, the only thing we really need here. Now instead we're gonna need our final MetaHuman in MetaHuman pose. We're gonna go and find that skeletal mesh for body and for head. That similar mesh that we need to create accessories. Now let's export them and bring to Blender. Now note, when you export head, that will also export everything but head, like eyelashes, mouse, etc. We don't need that because we are not gonna change the texture of it. So here in the materials, I suggest to click on the face skin material and select it. So it will select the mesh with this material assigned and then separate this selection. And the other part we can simply delete because we only need the face mesh, that face material, we're gonna replace only that texture. And we also can delete all the materials from that. For the body, it's easier. It's only one material, one body. That's fine. And don't forget to move the UV for the body because it still uses UDEEM and Unreal Engine space. We do not use UDEEMs and it will not work with AI texturings either. Well, with this set, we can export our new mesh. Well, again, that's a MetaHuman mesh with MetaHuman UV. Also, you can see I added hair right away and ears, so it texture all together in triple. So we're gonna export it as GLB. You don't need to export skeleton here. It's not needed. We're gonna go to triple and import our objects. Don't forget to set rotation to 90 here and do not disable use original UV. Keep it because we need that MetaHuman UV. That's whole thing. All right, we have it here. Now I can upload my original reference for the texture here and put that texture on new MetaHuman body. Here we go. And that exported GLB will basically give us separate color texture for body. Here you can see the body texture that followed the UV exactly. And for head as well. You can see the head and for hair also. That's absolutely great. Now you don't have to care about a transition. It all matches very nice. That means that we can take those textures right away to Unreal Engine and replace them. For the hairs and ears, I of course did it in the same way. I set the weights and then transferred them as static objects with the material, etc. The process there looked the same. And for this character, I wanted to try Toon Shader. I tested the Toon Shader. And here we go with the results, guys. That was super fun. And again, all of this you can do within an hour per character. Again, you can iterate, add more details, but the basic process is extremely fast. I don't know, I'm super hyped about this workflow. I was really not expecting it to be that great and useful. So yeah, you can see I was excited. I created like 4 characters at once. Last character was probably the easiest. No issues here whatsoever. So basically it's a tall ballerina, small head, long legs and arms. Again, all the same things here. Head separate for details, again, for accurate mapping. We don't want blurry mesh because that might make difficult auto solving. She is bald, of course, hairs separate. In anything that's not fit the body exactly might be separate in a different asset such as her dress. Auto solving, setting eyes, pretty much same exact process. Then bake the texture, replace the texture, add the accessories, combine them all together in Unreal Engine, and we already can do the belly animation. How cool is that, guys? Let me know in the comments. I of course tested every character with the live link. That's probably the most funniest part. Again, that face rig is most impressive, but again, it maps everything so accurate that I don't know, like if you remember, I was showing the similar workflow with the paid plugin that does that thing. That paid plugin was not giving that great result as we can get here for free. It was never been easier to create custom humanoid characters with AI as it is right now. Hope this tutorial was helpful for you. That was Steph. Like and subscribe, and I see you in the next video.